Hey, it's Matt from Cured by Nature. One of the most common questions that comes up with most people looking to treat their health challenges with CBD oil is CBD legal? What is the current legal status of cannabidiol or CBD? Considering the new DEA ruling of the CBD, we wanted to properly address the question, is CBD legal? And who better to talk to than to a lawyer, right? I have contacted one of the biggest, if not the biggest law firm that deals with cannabis industry, the Hoban Law Group. With a huge team of attorneys, they are the nation's only full-service, full-time cannabis business law firm that are involved with both marijuana and industrial hemp matters. Formed in 2009, the Hoban Law Group has been Colorado's largest and most experienced cannabis law firm that has consistently provided expert legal advice to its clients. So on today's Cured by Nature show, we are talking with Garrett Graff, one of the associates in the Hoban Law Group that has taken the time to answer our questions about the current legal status of cannabidiol or CBD. Hello, Garrett. Thank you very much for taking the time to be on the Cured by Nature show to help us with today's topic. Is CBD legal? Current cannabidiol legal status, considering the new DEA ruling. But first, let's go back a few weeks, okay? Let's go back before the DEA, Drug Enforcement Administration, made its new move and added to the confusion and actually scaring a lot of people that depend on the CBD. But you know, there was a lot of confusion even before that. In particular, people were asking, is CBD legal? Because, you know, there's hemp, there's marijuana, medical marijuana. People don't know what's what and so on and so forth. You know, people were asking if they're from the United States, do I have to import CBD from outside the United States, or I can order it from another state here in the US? Is it legal in European Union? And if so, you know, how do I get it there? But that's a bigger discussion since you guys are in the United States anyway. So if I was to ask you a few weeks ago, is CBD legal? What is really the current cannabidiol legal status? What would you say?
Sure. No, well, first of all, thank you for having me, Matt. It's a pleasure to be on Cured by Nature with you. With regards to before 1 week ago when the DEA came out with its announcement, cannabidiol is not on the Controlled Substances Act. You cannot find the word cannabidiol there, and thus we do not believe Congress scheduled the specific cannabinoid cannabidiol, or CBD. CBD is one of over 80 cannabinoids in the genus cannabis plant, and yes, there are marijuana or drug varieties of that plant, but there are also industrial hemp and non-drug varieties, non-psychoactive varieties of that plant. And so with that said, it would be possible to obtain cannabidiol from the stalk, the fiber, the stem, the herd of the plant, as well as from industrial hemp. From those types of varieties and from those parts of the plant, we believe that those have never been scheduled by the Controlled Substances Act and by Congress, and were not illegal substances. That may be contrary to the DEA's belief, but that's our position based on the law.
Okay, now this new DEA rules set in place just a week ago, adding to the whole cannabis, hemp, medical marijuana mess, adding to the confusion. What about now? Is CBD legal now? What is the current cannabidiol legal status after this new DEA rule?
Well, sure. It certainly throws another wrinkle into the regulatory scheme of marijuana and industrial hemp. And what I didn't mention a moment ago is it is possible to get cannabidiol from marijuana. So if that were the case, that would certainly perhaps be an unlawful way to source it. However, now after this DEA ruling, first I would note the DEA ruling does not go into effect until January 13th. So nothing has changed until January 13th from our perspective. But now thinking about once this ruling goes into effect, or if it goes into effect, what's changed? It's unclear. Some people have said this is a benign, very, very simple drug code classification for marijuana extracts, and it only applies to people who have obtained import and export permits from the DEA, which is generally pharmacists or people conducting research on marijuana. None of which are those who are engaged in hemp oil products and dietary supplements and that sort. Others, want to say, oh, the sky is falling. This is coming and crashing down on the industry. We don't think we're there yet either. We're somewhere in between. Our concern is that the definition of marijuana extracts under this new ruling from the DEA, it does not exclude the stalk, the fiber, the stem, and the heart of the plant, which is excluded from the definition of marijuana in the Controlled Substances Act. There's case law on this from 2003 and 2004. So this new ruling from the DEA does not reflect that case law or that definition of marijuana, nor does this ruling take into effect the carve-out of industrial hemp pursuant to the Agricultural Act of 2014 from 2 years ago. That carves out any part of the plant under 0.3% THC by dry weight. It's interesting to note this proposed ruling, or this ruling from the DEA, was first proposed 5 years ago. It then sat dormant for 5 years and was revived instantaneously last week. Because this was proposed 5 years ago, it couldn't having contemplated the Federal Farm Bill, the Agricultural Act of 2014, because that only happened 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. So there's these inconsistencies that are causing issues. And some people want to say, well, and even the DEA, I saw an article the other day that the DEA came out and said themselves, this does not impact industrial hemp, not to fear, it only impacts people who are using import-export permits. And the unfortunate reality is that we see very frequently that the DEA or other federal agencies specifically refer to these drug codes, not to the Controlled Substances Act, as whether something is a controlled substance or not. So even if the DEA is using the best of intentions with this new ruling, there is concern that it will be misused by either the DEA or other federal agencies for purposes of precluding imports from Europe or other countries around the world, as well as precluding the sale of other types of products. So that's the ultimate concern there. And while we hope for the best, we certainly want to prepare for the worst as well. And so that's what we're doing right now.
Great. Do you think this is the big pharma trying to mess with the CBD legal status? Was that it? Like they seem kind of lost in this race toward, who's gonna cash in.
Mm-hmm. I certainly think that could be playing a part. We've had several people comment that they think it's either the outgoing Obama administration or the incoming Trump administration. There's reasons for both of those theories. I don't necessarily know that I buy into either of them. I do think there could be some implication of big pharma here. The GW Pharma IND application, investigational new drug application, seems to be progressing, and I could certainly see how this movement by the DEA is an attempt to corral the CBD and hemp industry preemptively, so that if and or when the GW Pharma applications are passed to make these products drugs, they would be trying to make it easier for them to enforce it at that time.
So, sort of to speak, keeping the monopoly by themselves, something like that, right?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, if and when the drug application is passed for GW Pharmaceutical, and I think there's still an if there, not to mention, even if it is passed, what is a drug? Because the GW Pharma applications use isolated compounds of CBD. So are naturally occurring hemp extracts included in that definition as a drug? Are different concentrations of isolated CBD included in that definition of a drug? There's several questions to ask, but ultimately I think the point is that the DEA, in conjunction with the FDA, would be trying to corral the hemp industry as a whole for enforcement to police it. And that's what I think they're ultimately trying to do, but to some extent it's still speculation.
Sure. And then again, even the success stories out there today show that obviously the body reacts far better for the substances that have all the cannabinoids that the plant has to offer. So sort of the whole plant extracts compared to the isolates. So therefore, we can expect that if people are gonna try the pharmaceutical drugs where there's going to be cannabidiol in them, there's probably going to be cannabidiol from the as an isolate, and it's probably not going to show that much effect compared to the whole plant extract. So people are going to see the difference right away, especially those people that have been using whole plant extracts as cannabis oil or CBD oil or even THC oil. Right?
Sure. No, I think you make excellent points. I think what you're referring to is the entourage effect, where THC is augmented by CBD and the other cannabinoids, and to get the full spectrum, as we call it.
Yes.
The full spectrum effect. There's certainly science in support of that. There's science in support of cannabidiol individually as well. And ultimately, that science is still in development in terms of being accepted, on a wide enough scale for the federal government to acknowledge it. You and I, sitting here on this interview, are probably going to agree on most things, but getting a governmental agency to scientifically accept that proposition is a bit bigger of a task. So,
absolutely. Well, I understand that you guys are, work on this subject more from a business perspective. So even though you probably also have clients as individuals that have been, legally pursued as, I don't know, for drug abuse or whatever. But I understand that you're in it mostly from the business side. But I do want to ask you from the individual user side a few questions like, people are confused. Are they allowed to buy it? Do they need to be a medical marijuana patient, or they need to, to use the CBD? Some people even think about moving states or even countries to be allowed to use CBD. What's up with that? How people are confused. Are they going to be legally prosecuted or something like that if they use it, if they order it from another state, if they order it from outside the US, from Europe? What's up with that? What's your take on that?
Sure. No, it's an excellent question. You're right that our practice generally involves regulatory and business compliance, all aspects, including both local, state, national, international even. We don't necessarily practice criminal law, but we have our fingers throughout much of the industrial hemp industry. With that said, it really depends, and those individuals are confused, and rightfully so. Within the United States, there are states all over the country that have differing laws. They're inconsistent with federal law, and they're inconsistent with one another. Mm-hmm. And so something that remains to be seen and still needs to be done is what's called a preemption analysis. Does federal law trump state law, or does state law trump federal law? For the most part, in terms of what might happen, I can only speak to one occasion where we've seen criminal charges, and it was on a local county sheriff level, mm-hmm. Based on individual state law, not federal law. We've not seen very much federal involvement. Mostly federal involvement is related to customs or the FDA or the Alcohol Bureau with regards to regulatory compliance. They're saying that hemp oil or cannabidiol doesn't regulatorily comply. We disagree with them, but that's at a civil level in terms of it's on a company or a business level than on an individual or a criminal level. Mm-hmm. We have seen in some states where they've gone in and either temporarily or permanently seized products based on their interpretation of their state law. Again, these are generally infrequent, few and far between. And then, of course, one instance of criminal charges. So those thus far have been the exceptions, not the rules. But there are certain considerations, and so I would encourage everyone to become knowledgeable or seek legal counsel on their individual state laws and all the different risks and considerations. Those are things we work with our clients on a day-to-day basis in terms of, how do you best comply within the given regulatory structures and protect yourself given these inconsistent interpretations of law. We feel comfortable that the Farm Bill authorizes domestic hemp cultivation, and that companies can import stalk and stem and fiber and herd derivatives from Europe. That's federal law, but there's all these other analyses that need to take place as well.
Do you have any idea, like for example, what's the distinction if one extracts makes CBD or a cannabis extract from stem and from everything that's supposed to be allowed, quote unquote, or if they make CBD extracts or cannabis extracts from the flowers?
Well, so within the United States, the definition of industrial hemp for the domestically cultivated hemp includes the flowers.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's the entire part of the plant under 0.3% THC. Now that's different for something imported from Europe or China or elsewhere, where it is limited to the stalk, fibers, and herd. Your question or your point is an excellent one. It's very difficult to do so. We generally discuss with our clients that if they're importing something from Europe, that they obtain certifications that the supplier is supplying only derivatives from those portions of the plant that are lawful. Within the United States, there's less distinction in terms of is it from the flower or from the stalk and fiber. But we do, discuss having certifications as to the THC content to make sure it's below that 0.3% threshold. Now, if someone were to be obtaining it from marijuana, that's an entirely different regulatory structure. That's on only in certain states within the United States. So if someone is seeking to obtain, cannabis or marijuana oil that's, higher in THC content, that is subject to different laws and regulations and is only available in certain states within the United States.
Mm-hmm. Well, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, because of course marijuana is illegal under federal law here in the United States. So that's just a different regulatory scheme. But speaking to hemp and hemp-derived hemp oil and cannabidiol, it's hard to distinguish, and I think that's part of what concerns the DEA. I would suspect that that's the case. Is how do you know what is what? And that's something that we have to work through as an industry. But ultimately, just saying no to it is not the answer either by the FDA.
Absolutely. And that brings me actually to my next question. Now, we have mentioned hemp, we have mentioned marijuana, we have mentioned cannabis, and there's a whole lot of confusion about all of that. The terms, there's a lot of confusion about with people that are not in the industry, but I see articles written and they're inconsistent, written from the people that are in the industry. They just throw these terms around and sometimes using it as for medical marijuana, sometimes saying it's cannabis, it's medical cannabis, it's hemp. So, how do you, what is what? What's hemp? What's cannabis? What's marijuana? What's medical marijuana? Any other terms? I'm always interested in this, and there's a lot of debate about it. There's a lot of articles out there written, that hemp has been sort of arbitrary presented. They drew an arbitrary line between what has 0.3% THC and above, and what has 0.3 or less. Distinction between cannabis as hemp or cannabis as marijuana. What do you tell? Yeah, can you explain a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's an excellent question, and it is confusing. I mean, there's no easy answer because ultimately all of the definitions vary. At the federal level, within the United States, marijuana is defined as and I'm paraphrasing here, but effectively the flowering parts of the plant and viable seeds. It excludes the stalks, fibers, stems, and heart of the plant. And furthermore, there's then this newly created definition in 2014 that industrial hemp is all parts of the plant that are under 0.3% THC. You are correct in that it's an arbitrary definition. Some people say, well, industrial hemp should be 0.5 or 1.0. Well, I don't disagree, but ultimately Congress said 0.3. So for now, we get to operate under the definition of industrial hemp is all parts of the plant below 0.3% THC. In terms of marijuana versus hemp, medical cannabis, ultimately all of this comes from the genus cannabis, the cannabis plant. I generally prefer not to use the term cannabis because it could be referring to industrial hemp or to marijuana for that reason. They both come from the cannabis plant. In Colorado, marijuana, or the high THC version, above 0.3% THC, is defined as marijuana. Some people don't like the term because it's referred to as a slang term historically or things like that, but ultimately that's what the legal definition is in Colorado. Other states use cannabis. They say medical cannabis or retail cannabis or recreational cannabis. Or now adult use is the popular term. Adult use is meant to refer to recreational cannabis or recreational marijuana. Generally, when someone says cannabis or marijuana, they're referring to the high THC versions. Generally, some people want to refer to marijuana as cannabis because the connotation of cannabis is perhaps better than it is of marijuana. When you're dealing with industrial hemp, most people refer to industrial hemp or as hemp because its connotation is generally strictly as below 0.3% THC and non-psychoactive. But again, it depends on every single state's law. They use different phrases and different terms, but that generally, I think, gives you a general idea of what the different terms mean.
That's actually what my idea was after I studied everything I could get my hands on internet about whether something from the cannabis is called hemp or is it called marijuana or something else. Now, my last question would be, what are we to expect? Like from you say the new DEA ruling comes into play only after January 13, 2017, which is not that far ahead. So what are we to expect? The ones that are doing, CBD, that are in the CBD industry, or the patients that sort of rely on getting CBD and getting relief and help from the CBD, the cannabidiol?
Sure. So, I mean, there's certainly concern in terms of what is going to happen. And to some extent, we're just speculating at this point. Currently our firm and within our network, we are evaluating the different options from diplomatic resolution to the DEA, a lawsuit, administrative challenges to the ruling because we think the DEA acted outside of its authority. All of these options are on the table and being actively discussed. Ultimately, before January 13th, I don't see much changing. After January 13th, anything could happen. I mean, on January, shortly thereafter, within a week, President-elect Trump will take office. So, there's rumors or people who want to think that something will change once he takes office. I think that he surrounded himself with pragmatic people, and I don't think he's going to adversely affect the industry. My concern remains that even today, there are shipments of product being seized at customs and seeing other adverse effects by customs, the FDA, the Alcohol Bureau, all of which are citing DEA drug codes. Other ones, not this new one. So after January 13th, I think this new drug code gets added as yet another citation by these other agencies of reasons why something cannot be imported or used in commerce. Does that happen right away? Does that happen consistently? Is it only by federal law enforcement or does state law enforcement get involved? Those are all questions that remain to be seen, and hopefully we never come to see them. Hopefully by then we've either resolved this issue directly with the DEA or initiated some type of action that will stall any enforcement of this action until it is resolved by a court or administrative body.
Great answer, thanks. And the industry, the hemp as well as the medical marijuana, or just marijuana, however you want to call it, is actually quite strong. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry, so I take it they can get into a fight.
No, I think there's plenty of opportunity for a fight. You mentioned how big the industry is. There's a thing called the Administrative Review Act, which essentially is anything that has above $100 million impact on the economy is subject to administrative review. So that's one of the avenues with which we could try to challenge this ruling. But as I said, we're keeping all options open for the moment and trying to prepare the best strategy and the most effective strategy that is supportive of the industry, and we'll go from there.
Well, Garrett, thank you so much for taking the time. I think that the subject, whether or not CBD is legal and what's the legal status of cannabidiol CBD, is much clearer now than it was before to many. What will happen after the January 13, we'll see. And I actually hope that we might be able to schedule perhaps another interview after the things get more turbulent, or maybe after the things settle down, and we can take a fresh look at where the industry is, what patients can expect, so that we can calm this situation down. People that are afraid of what might happen to them can feel more secure, and so on and so forth. So for now, thank you very much, and I'll talk to you in the New Year's.
Well, thank you, Matt. I appreciate you taking the time and having me on the show, and we look forward to speaking to you again soon and following up. And happy holidays to you.
Thank you. You too, man. So thanks again to Garrett from the Hoban Law Group that has put some professional lawyer light on the current legal status of the cannabidiol or CBD. Now, if you want to stay on top of the current legal changes going on in the whole hemp, CBD, medical marijuana industry, if you want to get more information about CBD, how it works, and if CBD would work for your health issues, if you want to see some of our clients talk about their success stories with CBD and how it has worked for them, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel here. And make sure you also go to our website, CuredByNature.org, to get the free ebook about CBD. If you like this episode, make sure you share it with your friends and relatives and everybody that you think that would need this advice. Make sure you give us some thumbs up and make sure you put a comment down below. If you have a question, you can also just send us an email to support@CuredByNature.org, and I will make sure you get some fast answers. I will see you next time.